Hi guys, how are you? I hope everyone is acclimating to life after break. We are all in this together and we are getting closer and closer to our finish line of the AP exam. So what I want to do today is make a video about World War I, and I want to talk to you guys about different battles and different things that are happening so we can really in class just go over that end part, which is going to be peace without victory and really about Woodrow Wilson and how he deals with the end of the war and how we do not join the League of Nations, right? And also I want to save the beginning part for class. So really just that chunk at the very beginning that says the world prior to 1914. I want to talk about a lot of this literature, like All Quiet on the Western Front and A Farewell to Arms, and the legacy that this war leaves behind for these men that Gertrude Stein and women that she is going to call a lost generation, and what this does to the world, and ultimately not just emotionally and psychologically, but how it then sets us up as a world and as a nation as well for World War II, right? So I want to talk about that in class together. But what I want to do is discuss right now quickly how this begins, why this happens, and what is going on in America's home front. This is really going to be section 1 and 2 and 3. And again, section 4 we're going to do in class together and talk a little bit more about that literature and that emotional impact. So as we said already in class today, we have the main reasons, right? And Caroline Wisherath added mania. I like it. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention your name on a YouTube video, but there you go, a little shout out. And main, of course, is going to be militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And the A, the extra A, can be for that assassination, right? So we know in this age of imperialism, everyone's trying to take everyone else's stuff, set up these spheres of influence, and really the militarism is taken to the next level, even though so many people are doing it, by Germany. And Germany under Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to compete so fiercely, so enormously globally with these other powers. They beef up their navy, their military, all this stuff, and it's a ripple effect. When other countries like France hear that they share a border with this country that is militarizing so much, then they militarize so much, right? And then Belgium hears that they're doing that, so they militarize, and on and on and on. And the thought is they are militarizing to stave off war, to make sure war doesn't happen. But we know that if you have a ton of guns, you're making them for something. You're going to use them for something, right? So they're preparing for war. And the extent to which countries, especially Germany, again, everyone's in on this, but Germany is by far one of the most aggressive. The extent to which countries like Germany go and prepare this war, they even come up with a plan in case they invade France. They're like, oh, in case we do this, we're going to go through Belgium, called the Scheifelen Plan. So when you're doing it that closely, when you have the guns for war, the plans for war, guess what? You're probably going to go to war. The probability of that actually happening is going to be much, much greater. So keep that in mind, that everybody's to blame, and no one's stopping, talking to each other. Hey, why'd you do that? Why do you have so many weapons? Can we talk about this diplomacy? Nope, just tons and tons and tons of weapons being built. Alliances, supposedly to prevent war, but in fact making it even closer. Everybody is anticipating a war. Everybody is thinking it's going to happen. Everyone's acting like it's going to happen, poised and tense like it's going to happen any moment. So guess what? It happens, right? And you see all of these different loyalties pledged to other countries in case it does. And again, we're just bringing it closer. So ties that are supposed to prevent war actually make it happen. When everything goes down, everybody knows of everybody else and their alliances. So what would have been a disagreement between two countries now involves everybody. And we'll talk about that in a second. The two alliances that form are the Triple Alliance, that is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Once the war breaks out, add the Ottoman Empire and take out Italy, and they're called the Central Powers. The other side is going to be the Triple Entente. This is France, this is Britain, and this is Russia. And once war breaks out, they are called the Allied Powers. The I, imperialism. We already talked about this in class. The extent to which everyone's trying to get the land, the power, the coaling station, the spheres of influence, all the raw materials, all at once, competing with each other. Of course this happens, right? Everyone's trying to elbow everybody else out of the way. You're going to set the ground for something like this to happen. And again, this nationalism is so intense. And keep in mind that in so many of these countries, you have recent nation building going on. This is the case with Germany, with Italy. They are not just nations that have been around for a while. They are brand new. They are high on this feeling of being this, culturally prideful country. And the tensions are going to be enormous. And then you still have these big empires, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and they're trying to hang on to countries that want to be independent. And you see this major clash between these small countries that are founded and growing and these big empires that are trying to hang on to different countries. So Europe essentially is this tinderbox. You just need the slightest flame and it's going to go up. And that happens, of course, with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. That's where the band gets its name, Take Me Out. And that's June 18th of 1914. A Serbian terrorist is going to kill a Serbian terrorist, Princip, is going to kill Francis Ferdinand. Now, when this happens, Austria-Hungary blames Serbia. And then Russia promised to protect Serbia. Germany, who's just been waiting for this, then declares war on France because they're Russia's ally. Germany invades Belgium. Good thing they have that plan already set to go. And Britain, of course, swore to protect Belgium. So when that happens, lo and behold, World War I has begun. So do you see what I mean about the alliances? Initially, this is between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, right? But because of all these different alliances, now you're bringing in all these countries from across Europe, and it is an MESS, right? When the fighting begins, it's a perfect metaphor, unfortunately, for where humanity is, because you have us literally in the dirt. We are dug down in the earth in these trenches, and you have two fronts. There is the Western Front, that is between Germany and France, and the Eastern Front between Germany and Russia. The Western Front is going to be what happens when Germany plows through Belgium. And I want to pause for a second and remember that whenever you have a country like Germany go through Belgium, you had massive refugees, massive amounts of refugees coming from Belgium that are placed in England, that are placed in all these different countries. And I want you to stop and think about how Belgium was really the Syria of its day. And would we treat someone like Syria differently if they were white people like they were coming out of Belgium at that time, right? As far as people's faiths and color of their skin and everything else, with everything that's going on in Syria and these strikes that just keep getting worse and people that are trying to get out to literally save their lives. This history just recycles, but you can bet that Belgians were much more warmly welcomed into homes because of their ethnicity. They just were. So burning towns, killing civilians, this is what Germany does, and there had not been an explicit, like, written down contract, but just an understanding that you leave civilians out of war, you don't do this kind of warfare, it's fought on a battlefield, and you're going to see that Germany's not playing by those rules. That is changing. They are going to be fighting with France. They are using all different kinds of technologies. They're using camouflage. We're going to talk about mustard gas, all this stuff. Chivalry of past warfare isn't happening. France is ill-equipped for this, and we know that Napoleon is their big military presence, but with the exception of that, France is going to have a hard time both in this war and in World War II. And they're kind of that old guard. The Germans are so militarized that they cannot keep up with them, and this is where you see a majority of that trench warfare happen. It is devastating, that trench warfare. It is brutal. It is stalemate style, meaning that you don't have big swaths of ground back and forth that change. You would go on these basically suicide missions. You have the two trenches, and in the middle was what was called no man's land. And the one side would wait for the other side to step up. The moment you did, they saw you and they started firing, and you would try to go as far as you could and get shot down and then retreat based on who was still alive. And very often that was very few people, right? And then you also have, that's just my phone, just ignore it. You have, the other side take their time and do that as well, and back and forth and back and forth. And again, people are literally dug into the ground. This isn't changing. You have often the mustard gas thrown into the tunnels and people jumping out. And we have photographs, we have photography, and this is going to change how people see war. People can see exactly what's going on. It is a nightmare, right? It is an absolute nightmare. But the trench warfare is just terrible. There are stories of people deliberately putting a hand up over so that somebody shoots it so they are injured. You would not be in the trenches the entire time. You would take certain rotations and be in the trenches, and it literally drove people mad. If you're there, think about it. It fills up with rainwater. It fills up with mud. You would get things called trench foot, trench mouth. I'm going to show you some pictures in class. It's not good. Insanity-provoking conditions, and even worse sometimes than the actual charge is over, or the sitting and waiting in these trenches, the lack of food that you would have, the no man's land in between just haunting people with the recognition that at some point you're going to have to run through there and they will see you coming precisely, right? Downton Abbey, War Horse, there's lots of really good films and TV shows that depict just the brutality of this type of fighting, right? And again, the poisonous gas that's thrown there. Often there'd be tunnelers, people who were hired to literally dig underneath the trenches and go into no man's land. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. Peaky Blinders is a show that he has flashbacks of when he was a tunneler and not being able to breathe in that situation. Oh my goodness. So the Western Front was devastating, and that's of course where Eric Maria Remarque is going to get his title, All Quiet on the Western Front, when he writes this very famous story of what he went through, right, and the hell that he saw. And then we have the Eastern Front, and this is between Germany and between Russia. Now, you're going to see this thankfully divert Germany's attention, so it's not all on France. Some of it is on Russia. Russia is going to fight them off, and you're going to see that Russia ultimately, push them away. And you can't invade Russia. We know by now. It doesn't work, right? But you are going to see Russia massively destabilized by this and what goes on. And they do not lose, but because they are so shook up by what happens, this is going to be then the breeding ground for the Bolsheviks or the Soviets to take power afterwards, right? And this is really how you're going to see Russia become communist. And again, there's all different movies and things that deal with it. Dr. Zhivago is a very famous one. So you're going to see Russia has swords, right? And Germany has bombs, but they do fight them off, but they are rocked by this. And because they are so rocked by this, we are going to see down the road, of course, the Bolshevik Revolution happen. So these battles, I am not going to go through each one of them, but you should know these names: Marne, Gallipoli, Verdun, Somme. Same story over and over, staggering loss of life, millions of young men that are killed in just single battles. Verdun is an example. Verdun is 11 months. 11 months for one battle. You lose millions of men. And these tactics are bleak, they are devastating, they are brutal, they are slow, often, again, resulting in stalemate, not one side really winning versus the other. It was terrible. And again, the majority of these trenches and a lot of this fighting is happening on that Western Front between Germany and France. And it was just so brutal. So what's going on with the United States? What are we doing? We right now are neutral. That's what's going on. We are not getting involved. We said we didn't want this war. We're not entering. And this is like Europe and their imperialism and their thing. Well, guess what? We were part of that too. We want to have our imperialist cake and just like hang out and not be a part of when it all goes down. But we were a part of this, right? We looked at what we did in China and Japan and Hawaii and everything else. And, when you see Wilson reelected in 1916, he's elected as a peace candidate. And a peace candidate means he's promising that he won't go to war. And to a lot of Americans who have husbands and sons, this sounds just fine. They don't want to. And yet, we're going to have two things, a boat and a note, that push us into this war. And something to keep in mind, too, we always have this relationship with Great Britain. We had a rocky start, but we have a very close relationship with them. Cultural ties, trade ties, language ties, all these things. We have so much in common with them, and this is going to pull us in. Also, German U-boat tactics. I love it. U-boat actually stands for Unterseeboot. Isn't that great? I feel like I could speak German if all words were that close. Undersea boat, right? But these are small subs, and this is part of the new technology. You're going to see these U-boats first say, we won't hit American merchant ships. We won't get involved. And then, this is the phrase you need to know, they declare unrestricted submarine warfare. When they do this, in February of 1917, this means like all bets are off. And of course, very soon afterwards, you're going to see the sinking of the Lusitania. And we're going to see a British cruise ship that is sunk by a German sub, and it kills 1,200 people, and that includes 128 Americans. There are some 700 survivors, but people are very, very upset with this. Eric Larson, the guy who I told you wrote Devil in the White City, he wrote an excellent book on the Lusitania called Dead Wake. I think we all know how it ends. But it's really fascinating. It talks about how this happens, how people were warned ahead of time. It's like when you book travel and there's a warning that says, oh, just in case, so this has been happening in this country. Most people are like, yeah, whatever. We don't read those warnings. The same was on the ticket of the Lusitania saying, just so you know, this is what Germany is doing, but we don't anticipate any issues. And this happens to these people on board. A bit of local history. Albert Hubbard, not L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology, but Albert Hubbard, is going to be the guy who started our Roycroft movement and the Roycroft campus and everything in East Aurora. And Albert Hubbard was on board. This is a crazy story. Albert Hubbard was sent to the Lusitania to go to England to try and be an emissary about the war effort. And that was his, alternative sentence to being in prison because he was sent in prison for being all about free love. Ridiculous. So he is going to be on the Lusitania. I believe his wife is with him to like serve this moral sentence of going to be an emissary, so he doesn't have to be in jail. And he, of course, is going to be killed in the Lusitania. Very sad. And then the note, the Zimmerman note. This is going to be an intercepted telegram. British intelligence comes to us and they say, we decoded a telegram from Germany to Mexico saying, hey, if you join the war, we will make sure that you get that land back that you lost in the Mexican-American War. We'll even give you Texas back, take it back, take New Mexico back as well. So again, isn't this convenient that Britain wants our help and that they decode this? But we take it at face value. The Zimmerman note is the last straw, and we are going to declare on April 6, 1917, to be fighting World War I on behalf of the Allied powers. Now, keep in mind, World War I starts from 1914 and it goes until 1918. We join in 1917. We have an overwhelming loss of life in that time period, just from 17 to 18. Think about Europe going from 14 to 18 and the style of fighting and their loss of life. We lose 50,000 United States soldiers. And we are going to see them killed in just, again, 1 year. And Europe is going to fight for 4. This is just a murderous, murderous waste of a war. And as we will in World War II, when we join, we do change the tides for the Allied powers. But we come in fresh and strong. Imagine if you're like fighting, hopefully not fighting, but you're playing a lacrosse game and, you know, all of a sudden the other team has like a second team that's on the bench the whole time and you have no subs. They're going to be fresher, stronger than you when they come in, right? So what's going on the home front? Industry booms on the home front. We produce so much for the war effort, whether it's uniforms or food or steel or anything. The jobs, the huge production, all that stuff. When we come to the 1920s and we look at that glitzy, Gatsby-esque wealth that everybody is going on, this is the wave that they are riding on. They are riding on the wealth derived from World War I in large part. Also, African Americans are a huge part of this war effort, and this is the reason that you see this great migration and lots of African Americans leave, go north to cities like St. Louis, to Buffalo, to Detroit, to Chicago, to find jobs in factories that are producing for World War I and the war effort. Patriotism is out of control. You see lots of food rationing. We're going to talk about that in World War II as well. Victory gardens. Don't buy fruits and vegetables. Grow your own. Save it for the troops. Things like meatless Mondays, all this stuff. Remember, you have lots of immigrants in America, and a ton of them are German. And it is not an easy time to be German. You're going to see German street names change. You're going to see people boycott German businesses. There are even stories of people getting lynched at this time that are German. So this is very, very bad for lots of German Americans. And you're going to see, for instance, in Buffalo, we have Liberty Bank today with the 2 statues of Liberty. It used to be called German Bank. And the name is changed during World War I because we are so anti-German at this time. They even renamed sauerkraut Liberty Cabbage. And this is ridiculous, and it reminds me when I was in high school, France was not very supportive of us going into the Middle East searching for weapons of mass destruction. So what they are going to do is take a stand against us, and lots of people saw that as unpatriotic, and they are going to say, you know, well, terrible France, why didn't they do that? So on lots of menus of like drive-in places and barbecue places, they would say, we don't serve French fries, we serve freedom fries. I remember seeing those signs and like, they're still French fries. But same thing, sauerkraut to Liberty Cabbage, we're still doing that as we did post 9/11. Also, people buy Liberty bonds. And again, this is a loan to your government in their time of need, and the whole idea is they will pay you back plus interest after the war. So you're giving that money to the government. It's your patriotic thing to do. Tons of propaganda, tons of posters, slogans, all of the above. This is when we have the I want you for the U.S. Army, the Uncle Sam. That was scary, wasn't it? And this is when you're going to see those images take over. We do the same in World War II. Women are in the workforce in huge numbers. They have to be. All the men are fighting. And as we said, women continue to fight for the right to vote through World War I. They do not stop, and they show up so massively, production, finance, medicine, everything in this war effort, that, again, after this, Woodrow Wilson and other people cannot help but say, how can we not give women the right to vote now? This has to happen. After the war, same after World War II, these women are kicked out of these jobs. Now, that does not mean that they go back quietly. Lots of them have a taste of the freedom, making their own money, being in charge of being good at stuff like medicine and finance and other things they weren't allowed to be a part of. And you're going to see them have that value and get a taste for that opportunity. And they're not just going to say, oh, I don't want to do that ever again. Keep it in mind. Also, in times of war, you see personal freedoms often most likely diminish. And we see that with the court case Schenck versus the United States in 1919. Schenck is someone who is speaking out against the war. He is, being treasonous by some standards at the time. And it is ruled that, listen, while you may not be within your freedom of speech. Well, you may be in your freedom of speech. If it's peacetime, this is wartime, and it's not okay. And Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to make that really famous comparison. He's going to say, listen, you have freedom of speech, but when it deliberately causes harm and chaos to other people, it's not okay. And he says it's like yelling fire in a crowded theater. I think you've heard that somewhere before. So it shows, again, in times of war, how civil liberties can sometimes suffer, and what's glorified and seen as more important is that overall war effort, and of course, having united front as a country. So guys, that is it for World War I. As I said, we will wrap it up in class. Thank you for listening, and welcome back. See ya.